Good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, December 17th. It is now 8:34 a.m. We're going to start our property committee. The first agenda item is the administration of policy 707, use of school facilities, and I will hand this over to Dr. Yannicone to start this topic.
Thanks so much, Kara. Good morning, everyone. We wanted to start with a review of policy 707, use of facilities. Over the last 10 days or so, I have received half a dozen inquiries from members of the community in regards to a cancellation for a Springfield Aquatic Club event that occurred on Saturday, December 7th. And it was the second set of inquiries that I had received this fall. Earlier in the semester, we had received inquiries from the Springfield Soccer Club in regards to the procedures that we follow with regard to use of facilities. And so I thought it would be worthwhile for the members of the school board and members of the public, if they view this later, to have an overview of the process we follow, how the policy currently reads, and then also ask the property committee if you're interested in having us make any adjustments or changes. So I'm going to share my screen. And I have a few things to just review quickly, and then I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Ferraro because he and Mr. Watley had the two departments that really do the work in implementing this policy. So when I received the most recent set of emails and concerns from the public, I asked our operations department and athletic departments to do a facilities review and analysis of the last 2 years. What are we finding in the use of facilities? Where might we have some sticking points, and where might we be able to grow as a district and as a community in our understanding of what's been going on? So first of all, just with regard to policy, we have a policy 707, use of facilities, that we follow. There is an administrative set of regulations that are also included. And we have an application process that members of the community and well beyond this community follow when they want to use any of our facilities. As you know, we had a series of updated reviews of our policies in the last 2.5 years. The most recent update and review of policy 707 was on August 20th of this year. And in general, we have this ability to really try to work with our needs as a district, as well as the needs of the community in using our facilities. So you see there the second bullet, the board recognizes that although the primary purpose of the school buildings, facilities, and property is to provide students with an appropriate learning environment, the board may make school facilities available to individuals and community groups without discrimination and in accordance with our policy, provided the use doesn't interfere with the educational program of the schools. And this policy establishes the conditions, restrictions, and procedures for the use of school facilities for non-school sponsored purposes. And then later on in the policy, there's a section on the application process. And within that, I'm just highlighting 2 bullet points with regard to the approval of the use of the facilities. So any conflict with school-sponsored activities allows us to deny an application, and then access to school facilities can be closed if we have renovations, maintenance work, cleaning that needs to happen, if there are changes to the school calendar, or a board action. So in theory, the board at any point could decide that one particular event or another, obviously following the previous statement about not being discriminatory, that the board could make decisions not to allow a particular event to occur. So those are the general policy guidelines. And we have a process in place for approval. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Mr. Ferraro. He's going to represent the operations department and the athletics department in sort of going through the process and then hitting on some of the data points we've reviewed in the last week. So Mr. Ferraro, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Yannicone. So here at the high school, any application for a high school athletic facility, whether that's a gymnasium, a pool, any of our athletic fields, they are first reviewed by the high school athletic department. And then ultimately they go through a long list of approvals and they end with the final sign off for our operations department. So really my office and Mr. Watley's office communicate back and forth about whether we think an event can take place safely, if there are any conflicts, and then we go through and approve those events. Non-athletic facilities, whether you want to use a classroom, an auditorium, those are first approved by the host administrator. Now here at the high school, that's probably our principal. And then at the other buildings, that's an administrator that they've designated in charge. So if you want to rent the high school auditorium, that goes first to, or the middle school auditorium rather, that first goes to the middle school. They go through their sets of approvals, and then ultimately again, it ends up in the operations department for final sign off and approval. We do our best that at the time of submission, we try to recognize conflicts, whether there are conflicts with existing school-based events or there are conflicts with other community groups that have already requested and rented the space. You know, we go through and we deny those dates that have conflicts at the onset. We do our best to try to catch all of those at the front, but as you'll see in a couple slides, we are reviewing a lot of permit requests on an annual basis. When we make those decisions, whether a permit is approved or denied or approved with certain modifications, the operations department will typically reach out to the individual that has made the rental request, and they will notify them, hey, you've been approved for all of the dates you've submitted, you've been approved, but we've denied these 3 dates, or we have denied your entire permit request due to a conflicting event. When possible, we will go back and forth with the club. I know a lot of the times, in particular, Springfield Soccer Club will reach out to us and say, hey, we'd like to use all the fields, you know, from 6 to 10 o'clock at night. Often I will answer the call and say, hey, we have a game this day. We need to use the fields until 6:30 or 7 o'clock. Are you okay pushing your permit time back? Those things happen as much as possible. So we will often alter events rather than denying or canceling outright. We'll try to work with the clubs and the community groups that use our space to try to give them as much access as possible. Cancellations do occur. They are rare, but they can happen for a number of reasons, whether it's you know, rainy weather, changes to a school event that we have to make. You know, sometimes our athletic teams will win a postseason game and we'll play a playoff game 2 days later. Unfortunately, we have to give short notice cancellations to groups to say, hey, unfortunately, we have to host a playoff game. That means we have to cancel your permit. Those things do happen. We try to take into consideration all factors when making those decisions. You know, me and Mr. Watley's office, we do our best to maximize access to our space, but there are times where we feel like our facility will be overrun, whether it's we don't have enough parking, we're unable to secure enough security for an event, or frankly, we don't have as much access to restrooms as we need. In the case for indoor events, typically, because we only have a limited amount of restrooms in our building, yeah, it's particular in the Aplex. You know, those are all things that we talk about. We talk through that, and we talk about how many you know, guests will be on our site and whether or not we can accommodate something like that. We will try to notify groups as early as possible for these cancellations. But like I said before, those technically can happen really at any time, and short notice is sometimes you know, required. So here are just some statistics. In 23-24 school year, from July to June, we had 2,023 requested events just from our biggest 5 contributors. That's Springfield Soccer Club, Springfield Aquatic Club, Spartan Boys and Girls Lacrosse, and Little League Baseball and Softball. So we had over 2,000 requests made for us just from those 5 groups in that calendar year. We approved almost all of them, I would say. You know, we approved 1,974 of those events at the initial submission. And then throughout the course of that year, we had to cancel those groups 135 times. And as you can see, 94 of those cancellations were due to inclement weather or poor field conditions. So in 2024 and 2025, and that's from July to now, and these numbers are constantly changing as I'm getting requests every single day. We've already received 1,181 requests, and we have approved 1,096 of those requests. We have had 31 total cancellations at this point, And I added some statistics here as to what those were for. 7 of those cancellations were due to the fact that we were replacing a power pole out on Springfield Way. 8 of those were due to conflicting school events, whether it's back to school night or teacher conferences, etc. 3 of those cancellations were due to the gym floor being refinished, as we do every year. 3 were due to weather conditions or field conditions. And then the remaining 10 were due to a host of things, whether it was a school water polo tournament, a wrestling tournament. LaSalle College High School rented our stadium for a football game and brought a lot of people. And then we had some senior nights. We had 3 senior nights here at the high school that we canceled some baseball. So those are kind of the statistics in terms of these are the big 5 last year. And again, this year we've fielded a lot of requests, and we continue to try to give access as much as we can. But there are situations where we need to shut the doors. So this really is a comparison about what the school uses versus how much we allow the community to use our fields. So during the 23-24 school year, the school and school programming, whether it's the high school program, the middle school programming, any of our elementaries, we hosted 1,170 school-based athletic events. That's every practice, every game, any off-season workout, team meetings, etc., the whole 9. Any athletic event that used one of our athletic spaces, we hosted 1,170 of those. And then during that same school year, we hosted 3,385 community-based programs. About 1,970 or so of those were from our big 5 contributors, whether it's the soccer club, SAC, the Little League baseball and softball, and Spartan Boys and Girls Lacrosse. And then there's about another 1,300 or so, 1,400 or so additional user groups that come and rent our space. So this number, this 3,000 number, includes all of our organizations, class 1, 2, and 3. And class 1 organizations are made up of 75% township residents. And we do not charge those groups. They do not get charged a rental fee. They are only charged security and custodial if they're renting a turf field here at the high school. And anyone that's using an outdoor space pays $150 for an access fee. And that's good for the entire year. So you pay that once to access our facilities, and then you're good for that school year. So at the large majority of these programs that rent our space, particularly if they're renting a grass field only, they're using our space at no charge. You can see here for class 2 organizations, we have 43 different spaces here within our school district that you can rent. There are a lot of other spaces that you can use. And those rental fees range from as low as $40 for a tennis court. If you want to come and run a clinic and you want to rent 2 tennis courts to do so, you could pay $80 and rent a tennis court. Up to $690 if you're going to use our gymnasium, which includes locker room for a full day. So if you want to have a one-off event where you need our locker rooms and you're going to use our gym and you're considered a class 2 organization, that would cost you $690, plus a couple out-of-pocket expenses if we have to charge you custodial, etc. And then again, class 3, same amount of rental venues. The prices just go up a little bit because there's less township involvement. These are really class 3 organizations are really groups that have really no ties to Springfield at all. If Pittsburgh Central Catholic wanted to come out and rent one of our spaces, it would be considered a class 3 organization, and we would charge them a higher rate. So this is an important slide for us because I think this shows what we have access to here in Springfield Township and what some of the local communities have access to. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see what we own, our district property. We own a pool. We have currently 2 baseball fields that are available for play. Typically that is 3, but the middle school field is undergoing a renovation, so that will not be available this springtime. We have 5 softball fields, 2 here at the high school, 2 down at the Church Road facility, and 1 down at Enfield. And we have 4 we call them multi-use rectangles. Effectively, you could play soccer, lacrosse, whatever it may be. We have 4 of those. 1 here at the high school, 2 down at the middle school, and then 1 over at the Church Road facility. And then we have 2 artificial turf surfaces both located here at the high school. Within our community, and I reached out to Emily Beata for this, our Parks and Rec director. Between all of their parks, they have 6 baseball fields that really vary in size. The only 90-foot baseball field that exists are here within the high school. So if you want to play, an older major league style baseball game, that has to happen here at the high school or at the middle school when their field is available. They have 4 softball fields, again, ranging in size. They have 6 total multi-use rectangular grass fields, 2 at Cisco Park, 3 at Laurel Beach, and 1 at Veterans. And then there are no outdoor artificial turf surfaces available for rent within the township. And then as you compare, Upper Dublin has 3 indoor pool facilities that they can use. They have 12 baseball fields, 9 softball fields, 28 grass fields, and 4 turf surfaces at their disposal. Wissahickon has 4 pools, 19 baseball fields, 13 softball fields, 33 grass fields, and 4 outdoor turf facilities that are available. And then Colonial, which is Plymouth White Marsh, has 2 indoor pools, 11 baseball, 11 softball, 16 grass surfaces, and 11 turf surfaces for use. And of note, Wissahickon and Colonial both have turf, baseball, and softball fields that they can use really year round. So I think this just paints a really good picture of what is available here in our township and the pressure that is put on the school district for space, because there really isn't a lot of options in our township for these groups to go to. So that's why they lean on us so heavily. And then the one added piece that I put in here is how many athletic programs we have at each of our high schools. Here at Springfield, we have 28 athletic programs that we are trying to service, which is really similar to all of the schools around us. So we have the same needs and constraints that all of these other schools have. They just have access to a lot more space than we do. So there really is a push from the community to get into our space, and we do the best we can to make sure that they have as much access as possible. Sometimes that means that we have to, use it for our own school programs, and that can be a challenge because there's not a lot of alternatives for these community programs to go to. But we do our best to try to give as much time as possible while still making sure that we protect our investments here at the school district, whether that's field use and overuse. But we do our best to give the community as much time as possible here at our school properties.
Thanks, Mr. Ferraro. I just want to wrap it up. Just a couple of points to highlight. One, I think that we recognize as a team, Mr. Watley and Mr. Ferraro and I met, and we recognize as a team that it was a real hardship for members of the community to have a late notice of a change last week. And the bottom line is, that we missed it. We missed that conflict, and we recognize that we missed that conflict. However, when you look at the totality of the expectation of the community for the use of our facilities, we feel like overall we're doing a really good job of meeting the needs. I had asked Mr. Ferraro to do the research on this last slide that I'm leaving up on the screen here, because I do think that this is sort of the crux of the issue. And I've asked Mr. Watley to share this information at the next Township Parks and Rec meeting, because I know we're building a community center in the township, and both Mr. Ferraro and Mr. Watley have been asked for feedback, and some of our students, on what does the township, what should they build, what should be provided by the township. And I think this really hits at the challenge for the community. We have terrific community groups who want to be able to participate locally. Obviously, there are some areas right around us where they could go and try to do some additional rentals, but they'd probably be subject to fees because they're outside those townships, as we charge fees for those who are outside Springfield Township. But I think that this is a good data point for us to be sharing with the community and in the challenges that we have in trying to meet everyone's needs. The other piece that isn't available on this slide, but I think may or may not be known to all the members of the committee, and I want to make sure to reflect it, is that in particular, Upper Dublin and Wissahickon have in their high schools new pools that have newer systems in place. And I'm not sure exactly of the reasons a number of years ago for us not renovating or redoing the pool when there were major athletic renovations at the high school. But there is no doubt that the size of the pool and the age of the systems definitely has an impact. And then with regard to turf and the access to turf, we do have high demand from the community. Wherever possible, they would like to be using the turf because again, there's no turf in the township beyond what we offer within the district. And then with regard to baseball in particular, I'll speak to, we have had high demand from the community for the use of our baseball field. And so we've had conversations about the fact that not having turf surfaces on our baseball fields, and I'm not currently in any way recommending that we change that, though Mr. Ferraro would love it. The wear and use of the baseball field, given the fact that it is not a turf surface, is absolutely, a challenge for us, given the degree of request we have for the use of those fields. So we have a real challenge in the district and in the township. We recognize that. We want to try to say yes as often as possible. But we absolutely need to be advocating in the township for additional resources because we're up against a good challenge, I think. So we're happy to take any questions you have, of Mr. Ferraro, of Mr. Watley, or of me. Mr. Needleman, I see your hand.
Yeah, sorry. I just excuse me, want to make two comments. And the first one, I would ask Mr. Wiley and Mr. Ferraro to correct me if I'm wrong. Given everything that you've laid out, Mr. Ferraro, it doesn't sound as though there's any change that could be made that would make things better. Given the limitations that you've laid out and that are on the screen right now, it just seems as though you're doing the best you can, and sometimes stuff happens. If I were not being recorded, I would say something other than stuff. Am I right about that?
I think so. And look, I'm always introspective, and I told Dr. Yannick on this. I said I will strive to be perfect, right? I see, 3,000-4,000 requests for our space on any given year, and I will do my best to make sure that I don't miss a couple days. We as a group, as the line of approvers, so to speak, between my office and Mr. Wiley's office, we're committed to making sure that we do a better job and try to do our best job to tease out those conflicts at their onset so that we can deny those permits as they are requested rather than canceling at a later date. We're committed to trying to do our best work. And we try, and I don't think that it's anybody's fault, so to speak, just with the volume that we have in terms of how many requests that we get, trying to tease out every single conflict, every potential conflict. It's a challenge, but we're committed to doing our best work for it. We are in a pinch when it comes to athletic facilities and the amount of use that we get. We're a small township, and our programs, our community programs, and our high school programs, middle school programs are expansive. Right? I think the soccer club has 700 or so athletes in it. SAC always has a huge amount of numbers in their program. So the demand for our facility is high, and we do really good work to make sure that we have access. But we also, like, if you drive by the school, our lights are on basically every day until 10 o'clock at night because somebody is out there playing, whether it's a high school program or Springfield Soccer Club. Like, we are used a lot, and we are operating 18 hours a day with these facilities, and it's a bear. So Mr. Watley and I communicate often about, particularly our grass surface here at the high school, at least, about can it handle another 40 hours this week from this rental that's being requested on top of the use that we're already getting from our physical education programs, from our high school athletic programs, from these community groups. So it's a part of the conversation. If we haven't gotten rain in a month and a half, and it's hot, dry weather in the middle of August and September, there are times where we have to have conversations about, is the field going to survive until October, November, if we are using it 12 hours a day. And it's a tough conversation. It's hard to forecast what that may be, but we do our best to make sure that we're saying yes as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make one more brief comment. And I want to preface this by saying I was one of those parents who dragged his fifth grader out to SAC last weekend, uh, and it was canceled, and we didn't know anything about it until we got an email from the head of that organization later. So I just want to make a very brief, unscoldy, if that's a word, uh, uh, PSA to the leaders of our community organizations. You've heard on this call, and there was a reason I asked the question the way I asked it. These decisions are not being made by our director of operations and our athletic director out of any malicious intent. Accommodations are trying to be made all the time. Sometimes just stuff happens. And I just want to remind our community leaders that you are in fact community leaders. And so the messages that are communicated to the staff at the school are read and are absorbed by the participants of those associations. And so if those messages are sharp, are pointed, are personal, the participants in those organizations are going to see that and are going to learn how to communicate with the folks with whom they need to communicate. And maybe that's not the best way to communicate with people. That's thus endeth the PSA. I'll turn it over to Mr. Franco. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. DeFranco, I'm sorry, I was muted. I see your hand.
Sorry, and I didn't hear Mr. Needleman as he was signing off there. Thank you for the very thorough review. Couple questions. So, looking at the 41 or so cancellations from last year that were not field or weather conditions, was there a lot of pushback feedback for those cancellations? Were they like more timely so that the organizations could pivot, or were they sort of similar to this year? And the reason I'm asking this is I've never had any pushback or feedback from the community that I've received in previous years about cancellations, but I've been getting them this year, one, because my family's active in SAC, but also I've been getting them from the soccer club. And so like initially with the soccer club, I said, I'm sure the school has a reason, because I assume that there's always a reason for what the district is doing. But then as it became something where I'm seeing it more, and then of course, when you experience something yourself, it changes things. But what's the difference between this year and last year? Is there a difference in feedback, pushback that you're getting from these organizations when there's cancellations?
And so I can answer that. We had a similar conversation last year with one of our community groups regarding kind of the same similar topic, right? They felt like they were being canceled at a higher rate, or they received a cancellation that was a little bit late notice for them. And, we talked to that organization, and we talked through, similar to this, the steps that we take, the events that occur, et cetera, how things work here, and they felt okay after that conversation. I don't think that there was any animosity or anything like that with that group after that conversation occurred. I think we just needed to open that line of communication probably sooner than we did. I would say I don't feel that there's any difference between last year and this year in terms of the amount of cancellations that we have and the notice that we have provided to organizations. I think, and this is me speaking, I think that there is a disconnect from when an organization requests their space and what is initially approved at the time of that request. And that's something that Mr. Watley and I are going to try to take on with these groups. His office and my office, we're going to try to take on with these groups to make sure that they know what dates are approved at their initial permit request and what days are not. Because we have had groups reach out to us and concern community members reach out to us about days that were never approved. They were denied at the onset of the request, and they said, well, why'd you cancel this day? We didn't even know about it. So you were never approved at that date at the onset. So I think that that's something, maybe there's a break in the communication between the school district and the community groups, clearly identifying which days are initially approved at the onset of the request, and which days that they are actually permitted for. Because I think that can be a pinch point for groups if they have submitted, say, 20 days, and they then communicate out to their organization, here are the 20 days that we have. But when we go and look at those 20 days, we only approve 18 of them. Then all of a sudden, the community group thinks that 2 of their days were canceled, but they were never approved at the start. So I think that that's something that we as a school district need to make sure that we're really clear with the groups for that they really need to make sure that they're not communicating dates that aren't approved at their initial permit request. And I understand that sometimes they're pinched, or they're trying to get days out to their community. You know, they service hundreds of different families, but they want to get their 20 dates out and say, hey, this is when we're going to practice, or this is when we're going to have an event. So I think that we're going to try to do a better job making sure that everyone knows exactly what they've been approved for. But to answer your question more clearly, of those 41, I would say that a very large majority of those were given with what we would consider enough notice, you know, more than 2-week notice for those cancellations. I'm sure, based on some of the conversations we had last year, there were a few that were late notices, you know, whether it's a playoff game or whether it's something like in a similar situation to SAC, where days are just not identified at their onset, that all of a sudden we're a week before it needs to occur. And when we're doing our district calendar review, we say, oh, we really have a conflict here with another event, and we have to reach out to that club and say, hey, look, we're really sorry, but we need to cancel your event. So I think a majority of those 41 are ample notice, but, you know, I'm sure that there are a couple in there that are not.
Thank you for that. And then, Mr. Farrow, you're mentioning a disconnect with what was approved and what wasn't approved. None of those are included in your count, are they? Like, so if somebody thought they were approved but they weren't, you're not counting that as a cancellation, are you?
No. So that's the difference between these 2 numbers here. The 2023 as opposed to the 1,974. So I think what's occurring, or at least we've seen it occur, clubs are saying, I've submitted 70 events, 70 days, and then we approved 65 of them, but they've already communicated those 70 days out to their group, to their families. And then all of a sudden, when they realize, whether it's through the operations department when they send out their schedule or their final permit, they realize that those 5 dates have been canceled, whether the school day is closed, the district is closed, you know, for whatever it may be. There's back to school night that day, and we've denied that date on the onset. I think that there's a little bit of room that we can make up to say, okay, well, you submitted for 70 days. These are the 65 that we've approved. Make sure that when you communicate to your group, you're not, these 5 days that were denied, make sure that you understand that you're not having access to our site on those days.
Yeah. I understand that. All right. And then, so out of curiosity, this most recent thing with the wrestling tournament, I understand that this wrestling tournament was significantly larger than in the past. So if it were the same size as it has been in the past, is it safe to say that this conflict wouldn't have resulted in the cancellation, or would this have happened regardless? Like, or do we have a new aversion to having multiple events at the same time, or is this just a size thing?
No, I really do think it's the size, right? So like previously the wrestling tournament was an 8-team tournament. This year we moved up to a 12-team tournament. So with that, we really felt like we were going to overrun our indoor facilities. We weren't going to have access to enough restrooms. Really, with our wrestling tournament by itself, we were struggling to keep up from a custodian point of view. Like I felt bad for the custodians that were here trying to keep the restroom stocked and clean up the trash, etc. Because they were hustling that day. So I think if we were back to an 8-team tournament, one, it would alleviate some of the pressure on our parking. We really don't have that much parking here at the high school. I think part of the issue is that teams were coming from a much greater distance. So there were multiple coach buses here on our lot. And they didn't have the ability to drop off and leave. Like a lot of times in previous years, if someone from, Springside Chestnut Hill is coming to our tournament, they bring a van or they bring a bus, they drop them off, the bus leaves, and they come back at 5 o'clock. We had a team out from Pittsburgh, we had teams from Delaware, we had teams from Erie this year where buses were here and they stayed here. So that was really, a struggle for us in terms of parking because we didn't have other options to send those buses. Now we sent them to the middle school to try to make space for our spectators, but again, that's still spreading out into our other local lots. And as much as I can tell people, hey, parked out in Erdenheim and then walk to the high school, if you come on a Friday night and watch one of our football games, they will just double park on the sidewalk. They just want to be close. So
Yeah.
We try to take all of that into consideration, whether it's custodial needs, security needs, making sure that we can manage the event safely, keep up with the facility, and really park people safely on our campus. So I think, to answer your question, I think if we were at an 8-team tournament, the aquatic club and frankly the soccer club, who was also denied it that day, probably would have been able to have their permits. But the fact that we increased the size of our tournament, we were taking teams from a much larger area, really put us in a pinch.
All right, I understand. I appreciate the all the details and the time that you've taken to put this together.
Thanks very much. We appreciate the attention to it, and we'll continue to have dialogue with the township as well. We're optimistic that the center that they're building will have some help, some assistance to us as far as facility use is concerned. And in the meantime, obviously, if there's anything else relative to policy 707 that you'd like brought to the policy committee, just let us know. All right, so I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Green. I know we have our main topic for today, our middle school project.
You're good, Doug? All right. I'm
I
gonna,
think so.
yep, I'm gonna hand this over to Doug Taylor. He's had a little bit of connection issues. So if he bounces out, just give him a minute to reconnect. And we can go from there. But Doug is gonna take our second agenda item, the middle school renovations and additions. We got our bids in. We had our bid opening, and he's gonna take us through that process.
Thank you. Can you see the screen okay? Is it good?
Looks
Okay, thank you. So I do also have Shane Kniper with us this morning. Shane was the electrical designer for Snyder Hoffman Associates, working with Schrader Group. Dan is not with us. I think he had some other things going on this morning, but we'll go through this as quickly as we can. I know time is running out here this morning. From an agenda standpoint, I'm going to touch on the approvals and permitting, review the schedule update, review the bid results and the alternates that we had included in the bid, review the budget update, January board agenda items, and then upcoming property committee meeting items. So first, on project approvals, I think it's important to provide an update on where we stand with the land development process. We've gone through the Springfield Township and we have received their conditional approval. That approval is based upon us receiving our other required approvals, starting with the Montgomery County Conservation District. And just a brief update on that, we have submitted. There are specific timelines for each one of those submissions. Our civil engineer and design team met those timelines. A submission, they have X number of days to provide a letter of completeness, then a resubmission of the request. The Conservation District responds within 30 days. We resubmit, and it's gone back and forth. The civil engineer T&M has actually reached out to the Conservation District prior to each one of those submissions to make sure they understood what the content of the submission was, so that there was an understanding and an effort to expedite things. The bottom line is we were due our response from the Conservation District last month, and we have not received it. We need the Conservation District approval in order to move forward with the project, in order to receive a permit from the township. So that is really one of our biggest concerns. I think that the other approvals that are listed on here, the sewer planning module exemption, that's in progress. We should be getting that shortly. The Department of Health is in progress. We'll be receiving that shortly. And the land development agreements is something that's worked on between the district solicitor and the township solicitor, and that has been going back and forth. The critical path item is the Conservation District. So with that, we are going to get some of the specifics of that process that's taken place and ask Dr. Yannicone if she could assist in reaching out to some governing authorities in an effort to apply some pressure on the Conservation District. And Dr. Yannicone, I don't know if you want to mention anything about that or not.
Certainly, I'll be taking care of that later today. And I may, Mr. DeFranco, ask for some assistance from members of the school board in following up after I've had a chance to have some initial conversations. I'm certainly hopeful that with a little bit of outreach, maybe we can get things moving with that permit.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Yeah, to provide further clarity, the last response we essentially got from the Conservation District is that they are buried in submissions. We're somewhere around 18th in line, and they'll get to us when they can. And that's really not a satisfying answer from someone that you require, that requires their permit for you to start a project. So we need to get that moving. So we'll continue to bird dog that together as a team, but that's an update on the approvals. That will, though, impact our recommendation for board approval. I really don't want the board to move forward with approving contracts for 4 prime contractors that have a contract with the district, but not with each other, to start a project until we have those permits in hand. Because if we do and we can't get a building permit by March 15th, that would affect the contractors starting the project and put the district in a position where contractors could, have legit delay claim, issues. So I want to avoid that at all costs. We did, during bidding, push the intent to award date back from the beginning of February to March 15th to provide us with time to make sure we get all of these approvals in place before we award the project. So we'll continue to watch that together, and we'll make those recommendations to you as we see this moving. So from a schedule update, that kind of plays into this document. Not going to go through all of these dates, other than you can see the response to our second submission at the very on item 5 was expected no later than 11 December, but it was due in November. We haven't seen it. So we'll continue to track that, as we said. Moving down to item 12, review board results with the committee. We're right on task at performing that. Recommending the board approve the project on January 7th. That again will be contingent upon where we stand with this Conservation District item. We still have the second meeting in January, and if we had to, we have the February meeting because we're not starting until March. So we have time to resolve this. And the bids are due, valid long enough to allow us to do that as well. The executing the bonds and insurance just happens after we resolve, the actual board approval. Then we'll have the bonds and insurance executed, and the issuance of the notice to proceed is no later than March 15th. If we happen to have these get these approvals sooner and we can get the contractors started sooner, that's great. We have contractual milestones that require the contractors to still finish the respective phases as we previously discussed. The only thing that changed is when we start. So we adjusted the milestone dates, interim milestones dates, to reflect that March 15th start. So our construction still starts February, March, and finishes, as we said originally, 30 December 26. So the bid results, we had what I would consider a very successful bid. There are a lot of projects that are bidding right now. Some are more desirable than others. Obviously, a new school and a clean site is more desirable than renovations. There are options for contractors, and when there are options, they're more selective in bidding projects. But we were very fortunate. There are projects around us that were actually not receiving bids from all of the trades. We, for general contractors, had 4 possible bidders and 3 submitted bids. The apparent low bidder is Bracy Construction, who is actually working down the street at the township building project that we're managing at Upper Dublin. So they're a very good contractor. And I'm not going to go through all of the alternates at this point because any alternate that is recommended requires a look at all 4 prime contracts to see what the total value of that alternate is. Each one of those trades has a number that would reflect the total cost. So of the 4 possible bidders, 3 submitted for general. I'm going to move this. Get my picture in the way here. So that is Bracy. And I'll go through the alternates shortly. So mechanical construction, there were 7 possible mechanical bidders. We received bids from 4 of those possible bidders, and we have an apparent low of JBM Mechanical. Again, a contractor that we have done a lot of work with. Very good contractor, good reputation. They did a lot of work for us at Council Rock School District and many other districts. Electrical construction, there were 7 possible bidders. We did receive 2 bids. I know that BSI went after this project heavily because they are a local contractor. They are very good. They wanted the project in their backyard, but Electrotech is the apparent low bidder. I worked with Electrotech about 20 years ago at Penn Ridge School District. They've been around a long time, and they're also a very good contractor. So I have much confidence in Electrotech. And plumbing construction, of the 10 possible bidders, we had 2 that submitted, Reynolds and Myco, both very good contractors, and Reynolds is the apparent low for that trade. So to go through the alternates, let me see here. The alternate 1 was unclassified excavations, which would basically provide us with an insurance that if the contractors were to hit rock, that they would remove the rock at this. So the GCMC ECPC total cost of that unclassified excavations is $91,000. Based on our analysis of the excavations and where, and the geotechnical reports, we would not recommend accepting this because I don't think there's a value in prepaying for rock removal based on the quantity that you would have to encounter to pay that back. So we would pay that at a unit price if we do encounter any rock. It would be a better value. Same with the stone building pad. We put an alternate in to provide stone 5 foot outside the building footprint. That would allow us to continue to move forward, with the auditorium addition, even if there's rain or other weather events. However, we do have a soils exchange in that area where we're taking out a good bit of soil and putting stone. So I feel confident, and it's not worth the $230,000 to use the stone in lieu of soil there. Another alternate that we provided was an increase in warranty from 1 to 2 years, but again, $147,000 to extend it an additional year. We generally see any issues with systems within the first year. I don't think that there's a value in extending that 2 years. The other one you could debate, we could consider this later. This was sod in lieu of grass at just some select areas. Not the entire project for $8,470. We weren't recommending that. There's also mill and overlay of existing paving, basically one half of the site and the other half of the site. And I think this is one we can kind of decide, not that we would honor this alternate at the end of the project, but we could take a look at what the comparative cost would be at the end of the job. If we have enough allowance in the contractor's numbers, maybe consider doing this at the end, but I wouldn't recommend accepting it at this time. a new bus canopy. We basically are removing the existing canopy, but we are installing new window systems at that area with a recommendation to put some sun louvers on those windows for both heat gain in the cafeteria and visual appearance. It'll, serve as both. We're not recommending putting the canopy back. I don't know that there's a lot of use of the canopy, but again, these are all open for discussion. The next one was a 30-year alternative roof system, which is a cold applied roof versus hot applied. It's just a different way of installing a roof. You don't have the kettle sitting outside. And again, for $264,000, that's a lot of extra money for a different application. So the next 4 or 5 are associated with the sustainable features on the project. And I guess I want to start by saying, even if we don't accept these alternates for solar or for a green roof, our project does have numerous sustainable features. And Shane, you're welcome to join in on this as well. We have energy recovery units on the air handling units, which help us capture some of that conditioned space that's leaving the building and recirculating that and recovering the energy from it. Geothermal well fields, we're extending the well field. So again, 2 pretty significant sustainable features. Daylight harvesting for the lights in the spaces where with daylighting coming into the space, they will dim accordingly to maintain a level of foot candles without utilizing the entire energy that might be needed for the fixture. It will reduce the output based on natural light sharing the space. And we have LED lighting. So those are features that if we were going with a LEED silver or gold building would incorporate in that project regardless. Personally, I've done several LEED gold projects at Council Rock, and those were the primary features. Actually, we received it without the geothermal, so we've gone beyond that here. So I just wanted to say that we should be proud of the sustainable features we've incorporated in this project in the base bid. Alternate to consider solar, and Shane, I'll let you comment. The new electric substation for solar is an add of 648,000, and maybe you can explain why we would need that, Shane.
Yeah, yep. So when adding solar to a building that doesn't have it already, it does take up space within the substation. So the switchgear that's currently located in the basement of the middle school. So unfortunately, that existing gear is out of space. So to add solar, the first step would need to be to extend or replace the unit substation in the basement. So if any solar alternates, would be, looked at to be considered to be included, that would need to be accepted first to provide space.
Thank you, Shane, sorry. So the next are the solar array. So we put an alternate in to add solar just at the auditorium roof. So the GC, the general contractor, and the EC electrical contractor both have a piece of this. The general contractor is providing a slip sheet or a sacrificial piece of finished roof underneath those solar panels to protect the roof that's underneath it. Between the GC number and the EC number, you're $337,000 to put solar on the auditorium roof, plus the 648. So you'd have to do the 648 and the 337. To put the solar array on the arts wing, it's 215,000. You would have the 648 plus the 215. If you're going to do the auditorium, it's a 648, 337, and 215. And if you're going to put the solar array in a 3-story classroom wing, it's 415,000. That would be 648 plus the 415. Or if you're doing all the areas, it's the 648, 337, 215, and 415, just to be clear. It's a pretty good amount of money. Shane, I think you did a payback analysis on that. Shane, I'm sorry.
Correct. Yeah. So because of the electrical upgrades required, the payback is definitely a little bit more than what we typically see. We estimate it to be about 26 years, with current utility rates. So not great. Typically see 10 to 15, but obviously the new gear, added some significant cost there.
Yeah, so between the new gear and we get the price for the recovery piece of slip sheet for the roof was higher than we would have expected. If there was any consideration of this, we would go back to the GC and have to revisit that later. We'd have to accept the alternate if we're doing this, or not accept it and reconsider the slip sheet would help in the cost, but I think you're still looking at a 20-year plus payback. It's still pretty significant. And then we considered a green roof at the auditorium in lieu of solar, which is an add of $231,000. And obviously a green roof is nice. I think it's nice when students can participate in it through a science program, or your building is designed in such a way that there are railings and roof access for educational programs. In this case, this would be isolated to the auditorium roof where it is not easily, accessed. I think even Charles will have a challenge getting to the roof to maintain the green roof, but it is a possible feature if you wanted to have that sustainable feature. That's an add of $231,000. Now, what we are recommending are those in bold. The unit ventilators in the existing classrooms are loud and fairly tired, and in a few years, they're going to need to be replaced regardless of if you do it now. We have a very favorable number between the general contractor, mechanical, and electrical. The general would be doing some repairs to the existing countertops and cabinets as the old units come out and the new units go in. There's some fillers and things that need to be addressed, maybe some ceiling or floor modifications. The mechanical contractor is providing the new units and installing the new units, and the electrical contractor is providing the power connections to those units. That's an add of $1,355,650, which is a very good value. And we're recommending that be considered as part of your project. As I mentioned earlier, the sun control louvers at the cafeteria are basically an aluminum louver that gets attached horizontally to the exterior window systems. It may extend 18 or 24 inches beyond the face of the window, and it provides some sun control at the cafeteria. As the sun hits that window, it will create some shade within the space, and visually it adds a detail to that window. So that's $8,800 from the GC. We'd recommend that. All of these alternates, except for one, were add alternates. And the reason for that is, our budget was very tight. We did not want to include these in the bid and have these as deduct alternates and remove them to get to your number. We wanted to see where your number was base bid wise, based on your numbers, and then add to that based on where you landed with the bid. So the luxury vinyl tile to go to standard VCT, which is a 12 by 12 tile instead of a 2 by 2 tile, would be a savings of $20,000. But we would not recommend that minimal credit based upon the fact that the 2 by 2 tile are no wax tile. There'll be no maintenance other than cleaning those regularly. So, there's substantial payback over the years. VCT requires waxing and stripping. Charles could tell you more about that, but that's and he does a great job. Your floors look fantastic, but that's a different discussion. The whole building water softener is recommended based on the condition of the water. We did have it tested. It is hard water. It does take its toll on some of the systems in the building. The electrical contractor and plumbing contractor would provide that for $93,000. That would condition the water in the entire building. So we'd recommend that. And then there was a number to extend existing controls throughout the building at an add of $90,000, and we wouldn't recommend that based on that number. So I'll go through. There are any questions on the alternates before I move to the budget? I'm sorry, I'm trying to move it along here. I know you guys have a schedule here. So the project budget update. First, some key points. The base bid is $70,000 below the budget, and that basically is because if we were not going to award any of the alternates, and by making some adjustments to project phasing cost and project contingency, we're able to reduce those numbers based on where we are with the bids and some of the allowances that we have in the bids. We would be $70,000 under the project budget. But by recommending a couple of those alternates, such as the unit ventilators or heat pumps in the classrooms, the louvers, and the water softener, we're within about $1.4 million of the base bid that we projected for this project by adding those value-added alternates. So we're very favorable numbers, some very good values. So overall, we're in good shape. What we were able to do, again, to reduce some of those costs is under phasing costs. We had $500,000 for phasing, primarily, for contractors moving around the building and doing the things they were doing. We kept $200,000 in the budget for the district to pay some costs toward moving some things internally during construction. Like, for example, if we do move the weight room into the new weight room, Charles may need someone to come in and assist with moving that heavy equipment. There'd be some cost to do that. If we need to get a C box, a storage container for a couple years, and we need to lease that, there's some money there to cover that for the district. So we kept the money in to help offset some of those costs. The project contingency was at 1.5 million. We've reduced it to $1 million. So we're still carrying $1 million contingency for construction. The 4 prime contractors do have allowances in their budgets. Between the 4, there's about 1.4 million in allowances that we can apply to unforeseens as conditions may arise, and we'll work closely with the district to discuss those. So based on that allowance within the contractor's numbers, we're comfortable reducing that contingency and applying that $550,000 to offset some of those other costs. So, and the budget still includes $250,000 for furniture, fixture, and equipment, and $175,000 for technology. So overall, I think we're in really good shape. I really congratulate you on some favorable bids and some very good contractors. You did well on this project. Are there any questions on the budget?
None from me.
Okay, thank you. And then a couple of the agenda items. So we would recommend, and again, we want to keep a close eye on the Conservation District approval. If we can get that approval before we get to this January 7th meeting, I would recommend the approval of the bids, the general contractor, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We also received testing, adjusting, balancing, and commissioning numbers so that we have a third party working directly for the district to manage the installation of the HVAC equipment. They would do duct leak testing. They would observe the installations and provide final commissioning of those systems for the district to make sure they're performing as specified. And in the design phase, we already approved the construction testing agreement. So we have someone on board to assist with all of those items. And then the land development agreement, financial security. If this doesn't happen at the January 7th meeting, I'm hopeful it would happen at your plan meeting. Again, it's all contingent upon our efforts to get the Conservation District to get us our final approval. And in worst case scenario, we would move this approval to February if we had to. So those are what the approvals will be, and we will get you all of that information for your board packets. So you'll see all of those agreements. And then upcoming meetings, not sure if when Dr. Yannicone will want to put these on the agenda, but we will present the capital improvement plan that we prepared. We have finalized that plan. We're actually in the midst of making the electronic version, and we'll make hard copies depending on how many you would like of those. So we'll also present the draft 5-year capital plan as a result of that book that we prepared. And then ultimately review the results of the high school roof replacement for phase 3, which we're working on now. So that is all that I have, but are there any questions on the bids, on the project, or any of the upcoming presentations?
I don't have any questions. I do appreciate your thorough presentation and your time this morning.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate your time. Shane, did I miss anything? Is there anything you'd like to touch on?
No, I think you covered it well. So
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Doug,
Thank you.
I have a clarifying question,
Yes,
regarding the awards, and the January board meeting. If we do not have the permit from the Conservation District, we are holding off awarding those contracts or not in January? Should we expect to see that stuff on the board meeting at the interim board meeting in January?
my concern is by not hearing anything from the Conservation District to this point, my concern is, we're not going to have that approval before January 7th. And I would not recommend at this time approving the bids without having that approval in hand because I don't want to put the district in a compromising spot.
I just wanted to clarify that, but we can move forward if we have the township agreements and all that.
We
Um,
can,
we can move forward on January 7th with that.
we can. And again, it might be more realistic at your regularly scheduled meeting, depending on where things land. And if we're successful, and we'll have to just continue to play this one by ear. But the concern is if you approve those contracts, you now have 4 prime contractors that have an agreement with the district that are expecting to start a project on March 15th. And if the Conservation District doesn't move forward and we can't get building permits from the township because we don't have that Conservation District approval, and the first thing we start with is earthwork, which requires our E&S measures, erosion and sediment control measures, which are governed by the Conservation District. So we need to make sure we have all of that in hand and approved so that contractors can indeed start on the date we contractually tell them they can. And once we execute contracts, we're obligated to give them the site at that point. And if we tell them that we can't get permits, we didn't get our approvals, then they're going to start saying, well, then we have to submit, delay letters because you're not allowing us to start when we were supposed to start. I definitely don't want to put us in that position. So
Understood.
that's the reason that I'd say I'm not sure the 7th is viable, depending upon what Dr. Yannicone might be able to accomplish. We'll see. Sometimes I have had projects in the past where we had a state representative reach out to the Conservation District, and within days we had, a letter in our hand. It's not that we didn't do our work. It's all submitted and we did all of our good work to get it in. It's just waiting for them to tell us that we're good to go. So,
So
Thank you.
Doug, if I can just clarify for Mr. DeFranco and Ms. Bell, because we do have currently a January 7th interim board meeting on the books. The sole purpose of which is to get these approvals across the desk of the board members. We traditionally do not hold that interim meeting in January because of the holiday break. Because obviously there's not many other items that can't wait till January 21st. So one option is that we continue to have that January 7th meeting scheduled, and we give ourselves until January 3rd to receive an update from the MCCD and the township. And if we receive it by the 3rd, it's no problem at all to continue to hold that scheduled meeting on the 7th. The alternative is we continue to work to get the approvals from those 2 groups, but we drop our interim board meeting on the 7th to take a little pressure off, and we maintain that we're going to aim for the 21st of January. Is there any difference in the March 15th start time if the approvals come the 21st as compared to the 7th?
no, your option 2 is right on the money. There's no reason to hold that interim meeting at this point. We can absolutely wait till the 21st, and if we don't have it for the 21st, then we will approve it in February. So I would cancel the interim meeting if it was solely for this and rely on the later January meeting, and then worst case, we approve this in February. But I appreciate that interim meeting just for this. Under normal circumstances, we we'd be there to get it approved, but your option 2 is perfect.
Okay, so the drop dead date, so you know, and I'll certainly communicate this both verbally and in writing later today to all the groups we talked about. The drop dead date for that paperwork to be in our hands would be the 18th then, January 18th, because Monday, the 20th, though we do under Sunshine have that 24-hour option. Monday, the 20th is a national federal holiday. That's Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And so I would estimate that Friday, the 18th would be, or I apologize, the 17th, Friday, the 17th.
Okay.
Be the drop dead date for those approvals to be in place in order to be on the agenda on the 21st. Mr. DeFranco, does that all make sense to you as the chair of this committee?
It does. Thank you for that.
Okay, so I will notify the full board that we will not need the meeting on January 7th, and that we'll be able to go with our regular board meeting on the 21st.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. All right.
And I think Charles has a few items yet to talk about relative to some of the projects we were working on together.
Yes, Mr. Watley, you have just a couple of updates. I know we're a little late on time, but let's try to give just a brief update on a few of these items.
Doug, if you can stop sharing your screen,
Oh,
please.
yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. All right, Charles, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'll make it brief. The LGI project is in process. We're making good progress on that. The carpeting was finished on the 11th. The chair installation was finished yesterday. I have a walkthrough scheduled with the folks that are putting up the digital boards and the 16:9 and the speakers shortly. So we'll do a walkthrough with them. I believe someone from the IT area will be there as well. The ramp at Erdenheim is complete. We have some cosmetic issues that we want the contractor to take a look at, but it's in use and everyone loves it. The middle school project, we're just waiting on soil testing, but in the meantime, they were out and they assembled the bleachers, so those are done. And then the high school roof project, the contractor said that they were finished. We just need to, we've submitted our punch list. We just need them to come back out so we can do the final walkthrough. And yesterday I had a meeting with some of the principals and the cleaning company. We just have to adjust our deep cleaning schedule. It's a short window, but everyone in the district seems happy with what's going on with the cleaning. We've changed some leadership teams. We've changed some associates. So the middle school has a brand new person, and so far so good. Everything is in good standing. If I don't see you again, Neil, or the board members, you guys have a great holiday.
Thank you. Quick question. Middle school, the plastic on the field over the geothermal, what is that?
It's to allow the field to heal. The field has been overused in our opinion, and we recommended them to use the other fields, but for some reason that field seems to be the go-to. So we put the tarp there. That will give the field a break and give it a chance to really heal. So that in the spring it'll be ready.
Great. All right. Thank you for that. I was just curious as I drive by and see the plastic.
Sure.
Mr. Watley, correct me if I'm wrong, but the lack of rain this fall really took a toll on our grass fields.
It absolutely did, and took a load of the fields, the trees, and although I prayed, I just couldn't get the answer that I was looking for.
Hey, are there any other questions or from the board? Owen, any questions on all the topics? A lot of information today.
No, I think I'm good. Thank you, though.
Okay. I just want to take 2 seconds to thank Doug and his team, Snyder Hoffman, Schrader, everybody. It is not often the business administrator is smiling when we are over budget a little bit, but those numbers were great and it afforded us to be able to do some things that is much needed in that building. I was super nervous about the ventilator number and it came in very well. So I'm very happy with that. So I do have to thank Doug because he has been a bulldog on the budget and making sure that, you know, my scowl didn't get too bad during this process. So I appreciate that and appreciate all the hard work. And it was an awesome bid opening. Also want to thank Charles for his leadership, just in facilities, for what you're doing for the LGI, because that turnaround has been great. And I'm excited for the students to be able to use it when they come back from the holiday break. So thank you very much for your leadership with not only that, but all the projects and the cleaning and everything. There's a lot going on in our district on the facility side. So you and your team are doing a great job. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the collaboration of the district. You're great teammates. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Well, if there's nothing else, we can adjourn the meeting, and I will echo what Mr. Watley says. Everybody have a great holiday, safe travels if anybody's traveling. And we'll see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.
you.